Shi Fangping. Shi Fangping is a native of Donggan County. His father, Shi Lion, was a tough, honest man who had a grudge against a wealthy family in the village, surnamed Yan. After a few years, Shi Lion fell seriously ill and was about to die, telling his family, "Now, Yang bought out the functionary and tortured me." And then, red and swollen, screaming to death. Shi Fangping, thinking of his father's tragic death, said, "My father handed in his life honestly. He can't talk cockroaches, but now, he's been accused and bullied by evil spirits. I'm going to the afterlife to avenge my father's revenge." From there, she stopped talking and sat and stood, like an idiot. It turns out, his soul has left his body. Shi Fangping thought that as soon as he left the house, he did not know where to go. And he asked for directions to the city when he saw pedestrians on the road. In a minute, into town. His father is in prison. Shi Fangping came to the prison entrance and saw his father lying under the eaves, looking awkward. "My father looked up at my son and cried in tears, telling him, 'The prison officials took bribes from Yang, tortured me day and night, and broke both his legs.' Shi Fang was furious, shouting at the jailer, 'If my father is guilty, he will be dealt with by the law. How can you dead people be destroyed at will?' So I went out and wrote a box." Just in time for Chen Huang's morning sit-in and ask questions, Shi Fangping wrongly threw the paper. The goat was scared, and the bribe was colluded. Before coming out to confront him, Chen Huang said that Shi Fangping had no evidence and dismissed him. Shi Fangping was full of grievances and could not tell them. He walked more than 100 miles in the shade and came to Zhanya to complain about the cheating by Chen Huangying. After a half-month delay, Shanxi tried the case, but beat up Shi Fangping and sent him back to Chenghuang for a retrial. Shi Fangping returned to Zhanya, where he was tortured and his grief was beyond redemption. If Chenghuang is afraid of his further appeal, he will send a fearman to escort him home. The serviceman went back to Langku, but Shi Fangping refused to enter the door, and then sneaked to Yan Wangdian to accuse Shanxi and Chenghuang of taking bribes and ruining the innocent. Lord Yan will immediately send his men to take on Xinji and Sun Huang. Fearful of Chenghuang, Shanxi secretly sent his confidant to Shi Fangping for intercede, and promised Shi Fangping 1,000 yuans of silver. Shi Fangping didn't listen. A few days later, the owner of the hotel told him, "You are so angry at me, the government, and you are not listening to your request. Now that Cheng Huang and county chief have sent a letter to Yan Wang, your case is going to be awful." Shi Fangping thought this was hearsay and didn't believe it. Soon after, a black-clad court heir, Fangping, went to see Yan Wang. After he was promoted to the hall, Shi Fangping was so angry at Yan that he could not defend himself, and he ordered his servicemen to beat him up. Shi Fangping asked, "What crime has a minor committed?" "The king is," as if he didn't hear you. Shi Fangping was beating each other, shout, I should. Who told me I didn't have any money?" "The king is even more hot. Send the kid to set the fire." Bed. The two kids dragged Shi Fangping down the hall, and saw that there was an iron bed on the eastern stairs. And the bed was burning with flames, and the bed surface was bright red. The kid peels off Shi Fangping's clothes, pushes him to the firebed and rubs him repeatedly. Shi Fangping is in extreme pain, the flesh and bone are burned to the black, so he can't die. About an hour later, the kid says, "Okay, just pick him up and get him out of bed and put on his clothes." Although he's limping, he's lucky enough to walk. Back in the hall, Yan asked, "Dare you complain again?" Shi Fangping said, "A great grievance has not been arisen, and we will never die. If you don't report it, it's a fraud. You must report it." Yan Wang said, "What are you suing?" Shi Fangping said, "We must complain about all the grievances I have suffered." The king is furious, and the devil saws him. The two kids pulled the square over, and saw only an 8 or 9 foot tall wooden column, standing on the ground, next to two boards covered in blood. The children were about to tie him up, and suddenly heard Shi Fangping shouting from the church, and the two children took him back. Yan Wang asked, "How dare you sue?" Shi Fangping replied. Absolutely, the king of Yan's life. The kids got the jigsaw. After the fall, the kid uses 2 wooden planks to pinch the square and tie it to a wooden post. As soon as he got off the saw, Shi Fangping felt that his head was gradually becoming half-hearted and intolerable, but he said nothing through his teeth. I heard a little ghost say, "What a tough guy." The saws rumbled, and they were about to reach the square of the chest. And a little ghost was heard saying, "There's nothing wrong with this man. He's a filial son. Let's not damage his heart." I felt that the sawing blade was coming down, and Shi Fangping's pain was even worse. For a moment, the body was sawed in half. The kid took the board off, and Shi Fangping collapsed on both sides of the floor. The child returns loudly in the hall, shouting, "Let's get 2 halves together to see the king." The 2 kids put their bodies together and dragged Shi Fangping. "Mister," she felt the middle saw slit as if it had broken again. Half a step, he fell. A kid pulls a red ribbon out of his waist and says, "Give you this belt and repay your filial piety." Shi Fangping was strapped to his body and immediately felt fit without any pain. When Yan asked him, as he did in front of him, Shi replied, "No more charges, for fear of being tortured again." The king immediately sent the boy back to the earth. Fangping, the ghost manager, went out the north gate, pointed him the way home, and turned back. Shi Fangping thought that the darkness in the dark was worse than the sun, and how could he not reach God? The world has said that Jiranko Shiguchi is a relative of Emperor Yu, and he is wise and upright for the gods. The 2 ghouls are gone, so they turn south. 2 ghosts chased him, saying, "The king suspects you won't go back," and so on. Drag him back to the king. Yim must have been so annoyed, Mr. Shi thought, that this time the crime was worse. But Yan didn't seem a little angry, telling Shi, "I know you are a filial son. Your father's innocence has been revealed to me. Now that he has been born into a wealthy family, where do you have to complain? Now I'll send you back to your daughter's family. How about 100 years? Then I put it on the life and death books, and put a huge official seal on it, and told Shi Fangping to see it for himself. Shi Fangping thanks Yun for backing down, and the kid walked out the door with him. As he walked, the kid drove him to swear, "You skunky thief," over and over again, telling us to run around, exhausted. "If we do it again, we'll throw you in the mill and grind it down." Shi Fangping stares at him and shouts, "What are you kids trying to do? I can't stand the whipping. Please go back to Lord Yan. If Lord Yan asks me to go back, you don't have to send me. When you're done, run back." The 2 kids are scared. Talk him out of it. Shi Fangping walked slowly on purpose. Took a few steps and took a short break from the side of the road. The baby was holding his breath and could not speak. Half a day later, I came to a village, and the door was half open, and the kid sat down with Shi Fangping, who was sitting on the gate. "2 kids, get him through the door before he's ready." Shi Fangping was stunned, and after looking at himself, he was already a baby. He cried bitterly, ate no milk, and died 3 days later. Shi Fangping's soul was shaken, and I didn't forget to look for Jiro. It wafted for dozens of miles, and a guard of honor, decorated with bird feathers, came and lined the road. Shi Fangping ran away to avoid the honor guard, got caught by the people in front of him, and carried him to the car with a rope. Shi Fangping looked up at a young man in the car, and looked up at him. "Who are you?" he asked. Shi Fangping's grievances are unleashed, and he suspects that he must be a powerful official who might use his authority to make his own decisions and tell his own story of misery. The teenager told him to untie him and let him go with the car. Later, at one point, more than a dozen officials greeted him by the side of the road. The teenager greets everyone, then points to Shi Fangping and tells an official, "This is the lower bound, trying to go to you to complain. You'd better get to the bottom of the case, and get to the bottom of it." Shi Fangping asked his entourage to find out that the teenager sitting in the car was the 9th prince of the Jade Emperor, and that the man he had ordered was Jiro God. Shi Fangping is exhaustive, and sees Jiro as tall and bearded, unlike the legends of the world. After the 9 princes left, Shi Fangping followed Jiro to an official residence. I saw his father and his family, the goat, and the imperial service, all there. Soon, several prisoners were escorted from the prison van, but the Lord of Yan, the chief of county and the chief of city. The emperor interrogated Shi Fangping on the spot, and found out that all the accusations made by Shi Fangping were true. The 3 officers were scared and lying on the ground like rats. Jiro immediately wrote the judgment. And then the verdict was handed down, and everyone involved in the case read it. The judgment read, "The Lord Chartham, the Lord, as Lord Prince, was Theon, and Ben should have shown himself to be honest, and to be an example to his courtiers. He should not have taken bribes and bent the law, and invited others to denounce him. And yet, you form a clique to brag about the dignity of your rank. Venomous greed tarnishes the morale of your subjects. The bone marrow of women and children is emptied of the axe, and the mole of a mole is just as pathetic as a whale swallowing fish, and a fish eating shrimp. You should wash your intestines with water from the Shijiang River, and burn the firebed under the east wall." Cheng Hui and Zhang Si, as a parent official of the common people, he managed the common people well for God. Even though the official position is not high, he should spare no effort and work hard. That is to say, a big bureaucrat who is forced by a powerful force will be upright, even if he has the will to do so. And yet, you have conspired with each other to pervert the law and cheat, and have long forgotten the suffering of the people. You have unleashed your cunning conspiracies, not to mention your thin skin. It's a real honor to just take bribes and bend the law. You should have your bone marrow removed, your fur removed. And you should be sentenced to a temporary interventional death sentence for reincarnation and conversion into a cow and horse. Poor serviceman, if you are not a human being in a ghost mansion, you should only do good work in a government office and perhaps become a human being. How can you recreate the crime of heaven in the sea of suffering? Bossy, vicious, and bullying, blocking the juke road. Everyone knows that the prison guards can't cause trouble in the shadows, and that the people fear your butcher like cruelty. You should cut off your limbs and throw them in the oil pan to fish out your bones. Rich, unkind, crafty. The golden light covered the ground, and the king's palace was dark and unknown. The copper stench was so strong that he could not see the day in the city. Copper pays for a ghost. Gold and silver pays for a spirit. The goat's family property should be confiscated, and the family members should be rewarded for their filial piety. The above-mentioned offenders shall be immediately escorted to Dongyu Emperor for enforcement. The Jiro god again said to Shi Lion, "In honor of your son Zhao Yi, you are born with good nature and cowardice, and you will be given 36 years of immortality. Send 2 of them home on bail." Shi Fangping copied the judgment, and the father and son read it together. Back home, Shi Fangping revived and told the family to open his father's coffin and see his stiff body, still cold. It's not until it's dark that the warmth returns. Look for the transcript. It's gone. From then on, the Shi family grew rich. 3 years of kung fu, Yoshida became a piece. The Yang family's grandchildren were defeated, and the loft fields were all returned to the family. Some people in the village wanted to buy the sheep's fields. And at night, they had a dream of the gods chastising them. This is the Shi family stuff. You can't own it. Not convinced at first that a liter or half of grain could not be harvested for a year. After the crops had been planted, he had to sell it back to Mr. Seeger. Shi Fangping's father lived until he was in his 90s.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.